So as I mentioned to you guys in a previous video, the tribes that originally were here at the time that Europeans came to this land, called the Illinois Confederation or the Inoka people, they were displaced by another coalition of tribes and by the Iroquois coalition. One was the Dakota or the Ashaha tribe, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and you remember the Odawa, they had their chief Pontiac killed by a Peoria warrior, and the history goes that that was why they wanted revenge on the Illinois tribes. The Potawatomi, the Kickapoo, the Meskwaki or the Fox tribe, and the Sauk tribe, along with the Shawnee, the Cherokee, the Choctaw from the southeast. So they had attacked that Illinois Confederation. The Iroquois had also killed off a lot of them, and the Illinois tribes had to leave. Now, that coalition that had attacked them, they eventually got driven out themselves and had to move on to a different area, or not driven out, but they were kind of just circumstances forced them out. So the Sauk tribe started getting into it with the Dakota, the Pawnee, and the Osage Nation. Now the Sauk were getting along with the British, okay, and a lot of these tribes were actually getting along with the British, including the Iroquois, because the British, they were trading partners, and being trading partners, you know, you're doing business together, you're getting along. But the French were on a different side from the British, and the Sauk at first were getting along with the French actually, but it was kind of complicated because the Sauk were also allied with the Fox tribe or the Meskwaki tribe, and the Fox were not friends with the French. So the fact that the Sauk were allied with the Fox, that actually like kind of complicated their relations with France and kind of got them a little bit on France's bad side, because it's like they were clicked up with their enemies. So the reason why the Fox weren't getting along with the French was because the French were kind of trying to take over territory, and the Fox had fought back against them. This was back in the 1700s. But there was a battle in 1730. The French took a lot of captives, took a lot of women and children captives from the Fox tribe, and they killed a lot of them. And so the Fox refugees actually left and went over to the Sauk tribe. And you know, when the Fox took shelter with the Sauk tribe, then the Sauk tribe became targets of the French as well. Plus, you know, again, the Sauk were already like basically getting along with the British. Now, Chief Blackhawk, as you guys know from the hockey team, the Chicago Blackhawks, he was a Sauk chief. He was kind of like trying to keep the losses as minimal as possible, but he saw that he couldn't really win against the French. He was just trying to keep the land that he had, but he eventually lost. In 1832, there was something called the Black Hawk War, and they suffered a crushing defeat in that instance. But eventually, the Sauk tribe eventually moved into Missouri, and then later into Kansas and Nebraska. Then in 1869, when the Civil War was over, they actually went into what's called Indian Territory in Oklahoma, and they merged with the Fox tribe, and they are now federally recognized as the Sac and Fox Nation. Now, there are also a few of them in Iowa that just didn't want to leave the Midwest, but yeah, the majority of them are over there in Oklahoma. So that's, you know, kind of an example of what happened to two of the tribes that had replaced the Illinois Confederation. Now, while all this was going on, the Americans were involved in a conflict with the British for independence. As you guys know, 1776, that all started to go down. But during this whole time period, there was a Haitian immigrant named Jean-Baptiste DuSable. A lot of you guys are probably already familiar with that name. He came from what's now Haiti. So he was born in the city of Saint Marc. At that time, Saint-Domingue. If I'm pronouncing that right, I'm probably saying that wrong. But that's, you know, now the country of Haiti, you guys know. He was born to an African slave mother and a French sailor who was his father. So he was half and half. And he at some point traveled to France, and he was working on his father's ships, his father-owned ships over there. And he was able to get education, and he learned French, Spanish, English, and many different Native American dialects. So in 1764, he was shipwrecked near New Orleans. And later, he was thought to have been mentored by Chief Pontiac, who was the leader of several of those tribes from the Great Lakes. And Chief Pontiac was also against the British. He was one of the allies of the French, and DuSable was thought to be one of the people who negotiated peace among several of the Native American tribes after the war that Pontiac was involved in. So he went into business with his childhood friend Jacques Lemorgan, and he made a lot of money doing that. And besides outposts in Chicago, he also had established outposts in New Orleans, Peoria. He eventually settled, like I said, in Chicago. His wife's name was Kittiwaha, or Catherine was another name that she took. He eventually, in the early 1800s, sold the property that he had established here, and he moved to Missouri, and he remained in Missouri until his death in 1818. He had settled, well, originally, from the first time that he's really mentioned in somebody's journal in the late 1780s, like 1790, was around what they referred to as Chicago. This is basically from the French, but he was a trader, okay? Not Traitor, Trader, okay? The money kind of trading. And at this time, Illinois was like the frontier, okay? This was the time when, the Europeans were moving in on it, taking it over from the natives as the natives were moving out, largely because of conflicts with each other. And part of that was due to, the trading thing was big. That was everything back then. So based on who they were trading partners with, as far as European groups, French, British, Americans, a lot of times they would get embroiled in these wars that the Europeans had going on with each other. But DuSable settled over in what's now Chicago by the Chicago River, and this was the first documented non-Native American settler in this region. And so he is generally credited with being the founder of what is now the city of Chicago. So yes, I've reviewed in the previous 3 videos, there were natives here before that, but the urban center of what's now Chicago is generally referred to as being started by him. He established a trading post over here. Now, he was kind of not involved in, but he got wrapped up in the Revolutionary War that was going on because the British, okay, DuSable was like a wealthy guy, or he at least became wealthy later. The British suspected him of being a collaborator with the Americans, okay, while the war was going on. So they, for a time, took him captive. He was, by all accounts, a very smart trader and business guy. Now, when he died, a lot of his wealth apparently was gone. He was living off of basically other people giving him stuff and kind of helping him out. But he was never a slave here in the United States. He was obviously up in the region of Illinois. But, after the British took off, he went back, to the Chicago region and established that trading post. Now, while he was here, like in the early 1800s, the United States actually established a fort over by Chicago. That fort was destroyed in a Native American raid in the early 1800s, and it was rebuilt a few years later. So, that was also part of the first settlement of the city of Chicago. But his trading post is generally referred to as the first building or the first series of buildings that eventually would become this city. So there's a pretty sizable Haitian community in the city of Chicago today. Now, they don't really have any little Haiti neighborhood or anything like that. I used to stay for about 6 months down in Miami, in the area that's called North Miami, which is it borders Little Haiti, and it's basically like another Little Haiti. It's vast majority Haitian, Caribbean, and down there they really have an established community. But up here in Chicago, it's still pretty sizable, but they're mostly on the north side of the city. Like I said in a million videos, Chicago is not as redlined as people think it is, and as it really has a reputation for being, because there's a lot of black immigrants up north, and in the East Rogers Park area, and in the entire area that they refer to as the North Pole, there's a ton of Caribbean immigrants besides Africans. And I've known a lot of Haitians. We had a lot of Haitian kids at Sullivan. And I know that out in New York, they got a lot too. Pretty much, I would guess, most urban areas. But, they speak Creole, which is you guys know, a variation on French. And most of them can probably understand French if you speak French to them, and I believe a lot of them study French in school. More on how the city continued to grow in the next episode. It's going to get more into stuff that, you know, a lot of you guys are more familiar with, names and stuff like that, and more into what happened in the as Chicago became an urban area. I know a lot of you guys were saying like you can get this same information on PBS, which is true, but there's going to be, I'm going to go into some more detail about what's really not often covered in a lot of like PBS and History Channel documentaries in the upcoming episodes. When Chicago becomes an urban area, that's when it gets interesting. I just wanted to give a base for how everything started so that people can know what the origins of it are in a playlist that I'm making. I'm putting all these videos in a playlist, Chicago history. I want to go start to present day, so that we can, you know, so that I can at least have something to refer to just by copying and pasting a link when people ask, well, why is this going on? Why did this happen? Things of that nature. Thanks for watching, guys. This is your boy, Windy City Report. I'm out.